USS Augusta, English Channel, June 6, 1944. General Omar Bradley stands on the deck of his command ship 6 miles off the coast of France, staring through binoculars at a beach that's supposed to be secure by now. Omaha Beach. Intelligence told him it would be lightly defended. Intelligence said the 706th Static Infantry Division, mostly overage Germans and conscripted Poles with stomach ailments, would crumble under the naval bombardment. Intelligence promised that by mid-morning, American forces would be pushing inland. Instead, Bradley watches his men die. The landing craft exploded before reaching shore. Bodies float in the surf. Tanks burn on the beach. Medics drag wounded soldiers behind disabled vehicles that offer no real cover. Artillery fire tears through formations of troops pinned against a seawall. The radio brings reports of 90% casualties in some first-wave units. Officers are screaming for more support. Men are drowning under the weight of their equipment. And Bradley realizes with sickening certainty that intelligence got it catastrophically wrong. This is the story of why Eisenhower won D-Day but lost 10,000 men in the process. A story of the beach intelligence said would be lightly defended, but became the bloodiest killing ground in American military history. A story of decisions made, warnings ignored, and the price paid when planning meets reality. The planning for Operation Overlord began more than a year before D-Day. Allied intelligence officers analyze every inch of the Normandy coastline. They study tides, beach gradients, and sand oil composition. They photograph defenses from reconnaissance aircraft. They send commandos on nighttime raids to collect sand samples. British intelligence breaks German codes through Ultra, giving the Allies unprecedented insight into enemy dispositions. French resistance networks report German troop movements. By early 1944, the Allies possessed detailed maps of German fortifications along the Atlantic Wall. Omaha Beach stretches 6 miles between Pointe de la Perse and the Vire River estuary. It's chosen because it links Utah Beach to the west and the British-Canadian beaches to the east. Without Omaha, the invasion forces would be split, vulnerable to German counterattacks driving to the coast. The beach itself is a crescent of sand and shingle, backed by steep bluffs rising 100 feet. 5 draws or exits cut through these bluffs. Capture these draws, and vehicles can move inland. Failing to capture them, the entire beachhead stalls. Intelligence reports in May 1944 identify the German defenders at Omaha as the 716th Static Infantry Division. This is not a first-rate combat formation. It's composed of older soldiers, men with medical conditions that disqualify them from frontline service, and foreign conscripts, mostly Poles and Russians pressed into German service. They lack mobility, they lack combat experience, they lack the fanaticism of SS units. Allied planners calculate that the 716th will put up token resistance before surrendering or retreating. Naval bombardment and airstrikes should shatter whatever defences exist. The first wave of assault troops should reach the bluffs with manageable casualties. By H+2 hours, follow-on waves should be moving inland. It's a reasonable assessment based on available intelligence. The problem is that intelligence is incomplete, and what intelligence misses will cost thousands of American lives. March 15, 1944. German Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, commanding Army Group B responsible for defending the French coast, orders a reorganization. The 352nd Infantry Division, a full-strength combat division with experienced soldiers and modern equipment, moves from its position near Saint-Lô to the coast. It takes up positions between Bayeux and Carentan, reinforcing the 716th Static Division. 2 battalions of the 352nd deployed directly behind Omaha Beach, occupying defensive positions overlooking the landing areas. This is not a static defense unit. This is a mobile combat formation that fought on the Eastern Front. These soldiers know how to fight. Allied intelligence detects activity around Omaha but misinterprets it. Ultra intercepts mention the 352nd Division but place it inland, around Saint-Lô, more than 15 miles from the coast. Aerial reconnaissance photographs show increased activity at beach defences, but this is attributed to routine improvement of fortifications. French resistance reports are contradictory. Some mention new German units moving into the area. Others report no significant changes. Intelligence analysts, working with incomplete information and under pressure to finalize invasion plans, make a judgment call. The 352nd is assessed to be in reserve, not on the coast. Omaha Beach defenders remain listed as the 716th Static Division only. It's an intelligence failure with catastrophic consequences. But it's not the only factor that turns Omaha into a bloodbath. General Omar Bradley, commanding US First Army, makes several key decisions about the Omaha assault that reflect his experience and concerns. He's worried about a surprise. If naval bombardment lasts too long, it alerts German defenders to exactly where the invasion is happening. He orders the pre-invasion bombardment reduced from the requested 40 minutes to just 35 minutes. British beaches will receive much longer bombardments, but Bradley believes shorter is better for tactical surprise. He also decides to launch the assault at first light, around 0630 hours, believing dawn attacks provide enough visibility for naval gunners while limiting German defensive fire. These decisions seem reasonable in planning. In execution, they prove disastrous. The 35-minute naval bombardment is insufficient to destroy German fortifications. The bunkers and gun emplacements are built from thick, reinforced concrete, designed to withstand heavy fire. 35 minutes of shelling damages some positions but leaves most operational. When the bombardment lifts at Eisenhower, German defenders emerge from their bunkers, man their weapons, and prepare to repel the invasion. They're shaken but not defeated. Their fields of fire are intact, their ammunition is plentiful, and they can see the landing craft approaching in the growing daylight. The air bombardment fares even worse. 480 B-24 bombers drop 1,300 tons of bombs on the Omaha defenses. In theory, this should pulverize German positions. In practice, the bombers approach through thick cloud cover. Bombardiers can't see their targets. Fearful of hitting the approaching landing craft, they delay bomb release by a few seconds. Those seconds translate to distance. The bombs fall inland, behind the German defences, creating massive craters in empty fields that will later help Allied forces, but do nothing to suppress the beach defences. Not a single German position at Omaha Beach is destroyed by aerial bombing. The defenders are untouched. Then there's the DD tanks. Duplex-drive Shermans, swimming tanks equipped with canvas flotation screens and propellers. They're supposed to land ahead of the infantry, providing fire support as troops cross the beach. It's an ingenious solution in concept. In practice, the English Channel on June 6 is rougher than anticipated. Waves reach 4 to 6 feet. The DD tanks, launched 5,000 yards offshore, immediately struggle. The fragile flotation screens can't handle the rough seas. Water pours over the top. Tank after tank sinks. Of 32 DD tanks from the 741st Tank Battalion launched toward Omaha Beach, 29 sank within minutes. Crews drown in their tanks or struggle in the water, weighed down by equipment. Only 3 DD tanks reach the beach under their own power. A few more are brought in directly by landing craft after their commanders wisely decide not to launch in the rough water. But the armour support that Bradley's plan depends on largely vanishes beneath the waves. Company A, 116th Infantry Regiment, 29th Infantry Division, approaches Dog Green sector of Omaha Beach at 0630 hours. These men are from Bedford, Virginia, a small town that sent 35 of its sons to war with this company. They're in 6 landing craft, Higgins boats that carry about 30 men each. As they approach the beach, German artillery opens fire. Machine guns from multiple fortified positions sweep the waterline. The obstacles that intelligence said would be cleared by naval fire are intact. Steel hedgehogs, wooden stakes, concrete tetrahedra, many topped with mines. The ramps drop. Men jump into chest-deep water under withering fire. Within seconds, half of Company A is dead or wounded. Some are hit before leaving the landing craft. Others drown under the weight of 60-pound packs and equipment. Those who reach the beach find no cover. The tidal flat is swept by interlocking fields of machine gun fire from positions that should have been destroyed but weren't. Behind them, more landing craft are approaching, bringing more men into the killing zone. Bedford, Virginia, will lose 19 of its 35 men on that beach in the first 30 minutes. All along Omaha, the story repeats with variations. The 1st Infantry Division, the big red one, veterans of North Africa and Sicily, hit the eastern sectors. They expected to face the 716 Static Division. Instead, they encounter the 352nd. German soldiers fire from reinforced positions, artillery concentrations, pre-planned to cover every metre of the beach, rain down on American troops. The exits through the bluffs are blocked by obstacles, mines, and direct fire from positions overlooking each draw. Soldiers huddle behind disabled vehicles, seawalls, and the bodies of their comrades. Officers and NCOs are targeted specifically by German snipers. Communications break down. Units lose cohesion. Some companies cease to exist as organised formations within minutes of landing. From the Augusta, Bradley receives fragmentary reports that paint a picture of disaster. The 102nd Infantry has 96% casualties in its first wave companies. The Rangers assigned to Pointe de Hoc have scaled the cliffs only to discover that the big guns intelligence said were there have been moved inland. They're now isolated, taking casualties and accomplishing a mission based on faulty intelligence. DD tanks aren't providing support because most are at the bottom of the channel. Artillery that was supposed to be landed can't get ashore because the beach exits are blocked. Naval gunfire is limited because spotters on the beach are dead or pinned down and can't call in targets effectively. Bradley considers abandoning Omaha. Eisenhower has given him authority to evacuate if the situation becomes untenable and redirect forces to Utah Beach or the British sectors. For several hours, the invasion hangs in the balance. If Omaha fails, the entire Allied lodgement in Normandy is compromised. German forces could drive between the separated beachheads. The whole operation could collapse. What saves Omaha isn't the plan. It's individual acts of courage and small unit initiative that planners never anticipated. Navy destroyers, risking running aground, move to within 1,000 yards of shore and provide direct fire support against German positions. Engineers, despite horrific casualties, begin blowing gaps through obstacles. Small groups of soldiers, led by surviving officers and NCOs, find weak points in the German defences and begin working their way up the bluffs. Brigadier General Norman Cotter, Assistant Division Commander of the 29th Division, lands on Dog White sector and personally leads men off the beach. His famous order, Rangers, lead the way, becomes a rallying cry. Colonel George Taylor of the 16th Infantry Regiment tells pinned-down soldiers on Easy Red, "Two kinds of people are staying on this beach, the dead and those who are going to die. Now let's get the hell out of here." By mid-morning, American forces establish small footholds atop the bluffs. By early afternoon, they've expanded these into defensible positions. German defenders, facing destruction from naval gunfire now that their positions are identified, begin falling back. By nightfall, American forces control most of Omaha Beach, though they're nowhere near as far inland as planned. More than 34,000 American troops came ashore at Omaha on June 6th. Of these, approximately 2,400 become casualties. Some estimates run higher. Exact figures remain disputed because the chaos of the battle makes precise accounting impossible. What's not disputed is that Omaha suffers the highest casualties of any D-Day beach. Utah Beach, just 30 miles west, has fewer than 200 casualties. British and Canadian beaches, while facing tough resistance, achieved their objectives with casualties far lower than Omaha. In the days after D-Day, as the truth about the 352nd Division's presence becomes clear, questions arise. How did intelligence miss an entire combat division deploying to the coast? Why were warnings from the French resistance discounted? Why were ultra-intercepts misinterpreted? The answers reveal systemic problems in how intelligence was collected, analysed, and disseminated. Ultra-intelligence, while invaluable, had limitations. It provided German strategic communications, but not always tactical details. The 352nd Division's move to the coast happened relatively close to D-Day. By the time Ultra might have detected it, invasion planning was locked in. Landing craft were loaded. Ships were at sea. Changing plans based on late intelligence would have required postponing the invasion, and the weather window was already marginal. Eisenhower's decision to launch on June 6th came after 24 hours of bad weather had delayed the operation from June 5th. Further delays risked missing the optimal tidal and lunar conditions for weeks. Aerial reconnaissance had its own problems. Photographs showed increased activity at German defences, but interpreting this required expertise and time. Photo analysts were overwhelmed with images from the entire invasion area. Focusing on one sector in detail meant less coverage of others. The 352nd Division didn't announce its presence with obvious new constructions or large troop concentrations visible from the air. They moved into existing defensive positions, reinforcing rather than replacing the 716th. From 30,000 feet, this looked like a routine garrison rotation. French resistance provided crucial intelligence throughout the war, but by spring 1944, German counterintelligence had severely damaged resistance networks in Normandy. Communications were difficult. Reports were delayed, some were intercepted, others contained inaccuracies because resistance agents, while brave, weren't trained military intelligence officers. They reported what they saw, but might not understand its significance. A report of new German soldiers in an area could mean anything from a full division to a supply convoy passing through. The fundamental problem was cognitive bias in intelligence analysis. Allied planners desperately wanted Omaha Beach to be lightly defended because it had to be taken. The invasion plan required it. Changing the plan based on intelligence suggesting heavier defenses would have been enormously disruptive. So when intelligence was ambiguous, analysts interpreted it in ways that supported the existing plan. They wanted to believe the 706th Static Division was still the primary defender. They wanted to believe the 352nd was in reserve. They wanted to believe naval and air bombardment would suppress whatever defenses existed. This is confirmation bias, and it's a constant danger in military intelligence. Bradley's decisions about bombardment and timing also reflected biases. He'd seen amphibious assaults in the Mediterranean, where German defenders were alerted by prolonged bombardments and reinforced beach positions before the landing. He wanted tactical surprise. He prioritized it over destructive firepower. This made sense in the context of fighting the 716th Static Division, who might flee if surprised. It made less sense against the 352nd, who weren't going to flee regardless of when they saw the landing craft coming. The DD tank's disaster resulted from overconfidence in technology and underestimating nature. The tanks worked perfectly in calm training exercises. Launching them 5,000 yards offshore seemed reasonable in planning. But the channel in early June is unpredictable. The weather on D-Day was already marginal, with Eisenhower having to make the agonizing decision to launch, despite poor conditions. Rough seas were anticipated, but not to the extent that they would sink 29 of 32 tanks. Junior officers on the landing craft carrying the tanks could see the problem, but lacked the authority to change the plan. Some did anyway, bringing their tanks directly to shore and saving them. Others followed orders and watched their men drown. Eisenhower, in the months after D-Day, faces criticism for the Omaha casualties. Some officers question whether better intelligence could have prevented the disaster. Others argue that the decision-making process prioritized operational security over adapting to late intelligence. Eisenhower's response is characteristically direct. He accepts ultimate responsibility as Supreme Allied Commander. He points out that intelligence is never perfect, that commanders must make decisions based on incomplete information, and that the invasion succeeded despite the cost to Omaha. He's right, but the families of the dead aren't comforted by strategic success. The 352nd Division, after suffering heavy casualties on D-Day, fought on for several more weeks before being effectively destroyed in the Normandy campaign. Captured German officers later admitted they were surprised by where the invasion came. They expected Pas de Calais, not Normandy. They were surprised by the timing. The bad weather on June 5–6 convinced many German commanders that an invasion was impossible for several days, allowing Rommel to leave Normandy to visit his wife in Germany. He's not even in France when the invasion begins. The Allies achieved strategic surprise at the operational level. They failed to achieve tactical surprise at Omaha Beach specifically, and that failure cost dearly. Pointe de Hoc, the cliff-top position that Rangers assaulted at terrible cost, becomes a symbol of both courage and intelligence failure. The Rangers were told the position contains 6 155mm guns capable of firing on both Omaha and Utah beaches. They scaled 100-foot cliffs under fire to destroy these guns. When they reached the top, the guns weren't there. They'd been moved inland weeks before. French resistance had reported this. The information reached Allied intelligence. It apparently didn't reach the Rangers until after they'd taken 90% casualties, capturing a position containing telephone poles painted to look like artillery barrels. The guns are eventually found and destroyed a mile inland by a Ranger patrol, but the main assault on the point accomplished little of tactical value at enormous cost. 77 Rangers died. 152 were wounded. Another 38 were missing. Out of 225 men who landed, fewer than 90 could still fight after 2 days. In the years after the war, Omaha Beach became mythologized. Stephen Ambrose's books and Steven Spielberg's Saving Private Ryan cement it in popular memory as the defining American experience of D-Day. The courage of the soldiers is rightly celebrated. The intelligence failures and command decisions that made their sacrifice necessary receive less attention. Military historians continue to debate whether Omaha could have been taken with fewer casualties. Some argue yes, if intelligence had been better, if bombardment had been longer, if DD tanks hadn't sunk. Others argue that assaulting a fortified beach always incurs heavy casualties, and that Omaha's losses, while tragic, were within acceptable ranges for the mission's strategic importance. The uncomfortable truth is that Eisenhower and his commanders knew casualties would be high. Pre-invasion estimates range from pessimistic to catastrophic. Eisenhower drafted a message taking full responsibility for failure to be released if the invasion was repulsed. He carried the burden of knowing that thousands would die following his orders. The question isn't whether casualties were acceptable in some abstract sense, but whether specific decisions made with the information available at the time unnecessarily increased those casualties. The intelligence failure regarding the 352nd Division falls into that category. With better intelligence, with more weight given to resistance reports, with less confirmation bias in analysis, Allied commanders might have known that Omaha would be more heavily defended than planned. They might have allocated more naval bombardment, more air support, more specialized armor. They might have repositioned forces to compensate for the stronger defense. They almost certainly wouldn't have called off the invasion because Omaha was too hard. The strategic imperative was too great, but they might have given the soldiers landing there a better chance of survival. The DD tanks disaster is more complex. The decision to launch them offshore reflected confidence in technology and the desire to get armor support to the beach early. The rough seas were partly bad luck, partly poor judgment by commanders who saw the conditions but launched anyway. Better decisions by individual landing craft skippers saved some tanks. Those decisions contradicted the plan but proved correct. Military success often depends on junior leaders making good decisions when the plan fails. But relying on that rather than planning better in the first place costs lives. Bradley's bombardment decision reflects the eternal tension between firepower and surprise. He chose surprise. Had he chosen a longer bombardment, critics would blame the loss of surprise if casualties had been high. Because casualties were high anyway, critics blame insufficient bombardment. It's unfair to judge commanders solely with hindsight, but it's also necessary to learn from mistakes, and prioritizing tactical surprise over destructive firepower against fortified positions was a mistake. The soldiers who stormed Omaha Beach on June 6, 1944, demonstrated extraordinary courage under conditions worse than they'd been led to expect. They succeeded not because of planning, but despite its failures. They won through individual initiative, small unit leadership, and sheer bloody determination. Omaha was secured by evening. The invasion succeeded. Hitler's Atlantic Wall was breached. Within 11 months, Germany would be defeated, but the cost at Omaha was higher than it needed to be. Intelligence failures, command decisions, and overconfidence in planning created conditions where American soldiers faced unexpectedly strong resistance with insufficient support. The beach intelligence said would be lightly defended became a slaughterhouse. The tanks that were supposed to provide cover sank. The bombardment meant to suppress defences barely scratched them, and thousands of young men paid with their lives for the gap between planning and reality. Eisenhower won D-Day. The strategic objective was achieved. The Allied foothold in France held and expanded. The road to Berlin opened. But at Omaha Beach, intelligence said one thing and reality delivered another. And the difference between what commanders expected and what soldiers faced cost 10,000 casualties in a single day. So what do you think? Were the casualties at Omaha the inevitable cost of assaulting a fortified beach, or did intelligence failures and command decisions unnecessarily increase them? Could better pre-invasion reconnaissance have detected the 352nd Division's deployment? Should Bradley have prioritized longer bombardment over tactical surprise? And what does Omaha teach us about the limits of intelligence and planning when war is fought by human beings in unpredictable conditions? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this story of D-Day's bloodiest beach resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the battles that shaped World War II. And check out our video on the Dieppe raid, another amphibious assault where poor intelligence and planning decisions led to catastrophic casualties and taught the Allies hard lessons they applied at Normandy. The courage of soldiers can overcome failures of planning, but it shouldn't have to. Omaha Beach proved that truth in blood.